Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our weekly webinar. This is Patrick Halstead. I'm doing your webinar today, and we've got a short little webinar here for you talking about how to generate PDF documents from your InfoPath forms. And first, before we get started, this week we have the Microsoft Ignite conference in Chicago, and of course the big overhang, the weighty overhang, shall we say, is InfoPath, right? So we've got a quick little, what's going on with InfoPath is the question. We've got a quick little poll for you before we get started, just to kind of wet your whistle here. And I'm just going to launch this poll, get some quick feedback here. We've been seeing a number of interesting posts come in from the Twitter sphere, and we're just going to do this quick question, if you can see the poll, hopefully. And I'm not seeing any response at all, so maybe I did something wrong. Oh, there we go. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things that are coming out of the Twitter sphere. This is your news report here at the beginning of the webinar. Number one, Infopedia. Number two, the Office 16 preview uninstalls InfoPath. Don't install the 16 preview if you need to use the client, and that includes the designer. Number three, the new SharePoint migration API doesn't handle InfoPath. That's another bug they're looking into. There's no announcement whatsoever from Microsoft. We were expecting that, like last year, they would announce the migration path. They did not. And I think one of the highlights of the conference is that Formotus has announced their cloud designers. There's one path forward for you. That we were, of course, a Formotus partner. And okay, so let's see. So of the 5 options, it looks like no NextGen and Formotus Cloud Designer are the top ones, but it's pretty much a mishmash. 30%, 20% of people think that the big news is Office 16 preview uninstalls, and only 8% think Infopedia is. Well, thanks a lot. I know we didn't get many people voting here, but I just wanted to start off with a little bit of news from the conference. So let's see, hopefully you can see my screen again. So first off, why do we want to generate PDFs? And the answer is, there's several answers. Number one is some people don't have InfoPath on the client. Sometimes you want to send a copy of your form that's been filled out to somebody and not allow them to edit it. In addition, you may want to create a snapshot in time for your auditing futures. And we'll talk about all of those today. There are many ways to generate PDFs in InfoPath today and SharePoint forms. If you're using the filler, you can export the form via what Microsoft calls XPS. And there's an export option underneath the file menu. You can do this. It's out of box. That's great. Unfortunately, it doesn't look so good. There's some issues with table borders. And it's client only, and you have to, of course, save it locally, attach it to email, so it's a hassle. There's no automation. What we use internally a lot for the client, the InfoPath client, is we use this thing called Qt PDF, which is free. It's a print driver that generates a PDF, and it works really well. But once again, it's a manual hassle, and it requires the client. So Muhimi's been around for a long time, and they have a server install. I have not looked at it recently, but as of about a year ago, it did require installing InfoPath on the server because they're using the InfoPath executable to actually generate the PDF. They may have changed that now, but the problem is it's not automatable either. You can use a workflow in SharePoint, but it becomes complex then, and it's server-side only, and it costs money, right? I guess the good news is it is server-side, so you don't have to do anything with your client, but it does cost some money. What we're showing today is our Qdabra web service that actually has been around for over 10 years, actually 11 years now, and it is server-side as well. It's more data-driven and doesn't require SharePoint, although it does work with SharePoint. And the PDF feature is V1. So even though the first demo scenario I'm going to show you is with the new form. So let's switch to our 365 site. And you can see I just tested with the form a few seconds ago, or a few minutes ago. I'm just going to create a new InfoPath form. This is just using the stock 2007 expense report. And it works with any form. there are, it works with images, it works with, anyway, let me just show you what this looks like here. So we've got our webinar, and we're going to send you guys some swag. So I'm just going to fill out this form very quickly here, not trying to spend a lot of time, but you want to see the data come through. Okay, so my manager's name is Janice, and it's really important that I put in the email addresses because that's what it's going to use to send the PDF. And I'm just going to use webinars so that it comes back to me and I can see it. And for the expenses, we'll send you some of Seattle's finest chocolate this morning because we love you. And we'll call it morale, entertainment, gifts. There we go. And lots of chocolate coming at you here, so $256 worth. I'm not sure what that happened. This is SharePoint, live, 365. Let's try another expense. And we'll do, we'll also send you some green tea. And this will also be a gift. And this one's not quite as bad, so it's $128. Okay, so we got our 2 expenses. We're going to submit our form. Now the form is going to submit to the SharePoint site. It actually is submitting to the web service as well. And let me show you what that looks like. We're going to wait for a minute for that email to come in. While we're waiting, I'm going to show you what the form looks like in the designer. So this is the form in the designer of InfoPath. I'm using 2010 because some of these still may be on it. And if we look at the data connections, you'll see that we have one data connection here to submit to the web service. And this is using an anonymous submit, but you can use an event receiver in SharePoint to synchronize with DBXL as well. So you don't have to actually set up a web service, but it's very easy to set these up. You just add a web service, you point it at that URL or a WSDL, web service description language, and then you convert it, as we've done here, to a connection file. And then once it's converted to a connection file, that's important to be able to display it and use it in the browser. The connection file will exist on SharePoint. You'll have it in your data connections library here, and if we look at this, you'll see that there's our connection to our Azure web service. Okay, so that's how we did it. Very simple to set up, and if I open this up, you could see the WSDL and everything included. Let's just see if I can do that real quick. It's going to let me open it. It doesn't have an option to open it, so we will open this way. It wants us to save it, so we'll save it to our webinars. See, I'll just put this in the kit for your webinar package today, and then let's open it using Notepad, whatever. And so here's the WSDL file. This is the data connections file, and we've done a lot of demos in the past on how to configure data connection files for browser forms. But you can see here that the web service, there's the web service right there. And there's nothing special we're doing here. There's no special credentials or anything, and that's why we're using the anonymous. It's just basically going to send it. Okay, so let's take a look at our email and see what happened. So when we submitted the form, it generated a PDF, and you can see there it is right there. It sent it to me because I'm on the webinars alias. It also CC'd my address because I was the submitter. And if we look at the PDF that was generated, you'll see exactly what we typed in. There's our chocolate, there's our green tea. It looks pretty good. This is a very nice rendition of what we filled out. So there it is. There's a quick demo. Now, if we go back to the SharePoint site and go back to our expense report, that's the one from last week. Okay, so this is the one from this week. I can go in here and I can just change the form. Just open up the correct one. I'm just going to add another expense. And let's see, who wants, we'll send you Qdabra t-shirts. It'll be UPS fee. Let's call this the UPS fee. And we'll call this, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, but we'll add an expense here. Now the total is $431. We submit this again, and in about a minute, we'll see another PDF appear in my inbox. So we'll take a look at that in a second. I want to just jump back and quickly go over this. So the first scenario really was to fill out a new form and submit it. A PDF is generated. The benefit here is that it emails the person in the form, and I'm going to show you how that's configured in a second. So not only is the email address configurable, but the subject and the body of the email are as well. And no code, it's all out of the box, InfoPath web service call. And then in the second scenario, we edited the same form by opening it, changing it, and submitting it, and it generated a new PDF. So you can control when it generates a PDF, whether it's on first submit, on edit, or on both. And this can also store PDF in a folder on your server, which can be synchronized to OneDrive, which can then be visible on your SharePoint site if you're using 365 or on-prem. It works from the browser, the filler, obviously works in the cloud, SharePoint on-prem, and it works without SharePoint or with SharePoint Foundation. So let me show you that PDF. Hopefully we got the new one there. There it is. And you can see it's just attaching it here. Now you can control the naming of the PDF as well. It's just using my first name right now, but you can see there's the additional expense there. So how is this happening behind the scenes? So we've installed a web service in Azure, and this web service is this DBXL web service. We've added a feature to it called PDF generation. And so this is our DBXL web service. This is the trial I've installed, so there's a warning here that you can just ignore. But the trial, you could install the trial for free today, and you can do all of this for free, and you can migrate all of your existing forms to PDFs for free. You may need us to show you how to do it, but it's pretty simple. What you have to do is once you install the trial, you add your form in here as a document type. So you can see here that my third form, QD Expense Report Sample, is the one I've added this week. Actually, this is included as a default sample in all of the installs. The two forms above, the Expense Report Azure is the one that Bree demoed last week, and you can see that she's got 12 documents there. So what I want to show, though, is how we've configured this to use the PDF generation. So first off is you're going to add your InfoPath form to the General tab, and then you're going to save it. Now you can also configure database mapping. The tool has a lot of support for mapping to databases, querying databases, other things. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but today we're focusing on that last feature, that PDF feature. So once you've added your InfoPath form, you don't need to add a database mapping. You just add your InfoPath form and save it. And then what you have to do is you have to go in and create a mapping to render it as PDF. Now we have a bunch of system document types. They're used for the workflow in the system and notifications, and this is all the stuff we've been using in solutions over the many years. And we've added now two system document types, one called QD Render Mapping and one called QD Render. And what I'm going to do is just take a look at this QD Render Mapping. Now the QD Render Mapping only has 2 documents in it currently, and that's because we're only rendering PDFs for these 2 different document types, the expense report from last week and the one I'm showing today. Now I've already opened this form. This is just an InfoPath form. This allows us to specify what the mapping, the PDF generation is. So when you open up that system document, you're going to see that it allows you to create a configuration for your InfoPath form. Now this is allowing you to configure the PDF generation for that InfoPath form. So right here it shows you all the different document types in your system. You select the one you want. You select the view you want. In this case, the expense report only has 1 view, because you can print using any view you want. It doesn't have to be a specific view. You can control when the document is submitted, whether you generate the PDF when the document is submitted or when it's modified. And then here you see the data-driven subject line. I'm using a concat feature to concatenate a value from the form, and this is just an XPath. So what you do is you go in to your form, you right-click on the data source, choose Copy XPath, right? And then you come back here and you just paste it in. and we're concatenating the name of the employee and then the business purpose here at the end. So that's very easy to do. The body can be an HTML body. This is a very simple one, or it can be an expression. And then, of course, we can configure our from, to, CC, and BCC addresses. And here you can see that we're doing this one dynamically as well, using the manager's email. The CC address, as you saw, was my email, the employee's email. And that's how easy it is to configure these. The emails, of course, you can configure where they're coming from. In this case, we're telling the user it's coming from notifications@formsword.com. So that's how easy it is. Let's take a look again at that email I got. So there you see it. There's the title, expense report for Patrick, and there's expense report for Patrick, and then dash the title, the business title. Now you can also use, you don't have to use SharePoint. So let's just take a look at what we would, what it looks like if we do it from the filler. As you would expect, launching it from the filler, you can launch it, of course, locally. I'm just going to launch it from this admin tool because it's easy to do. And we'll launch it just from the browser here. And so there's the form, and this is a quick test. We're just going to type in the relevant information to show that it's actually working from the filler. It was expensive. Okay, so in a second here we'll see that email come through. To return to the presentation then, so those are the demos. I've got another thing I want to show you real quick, first off, you can take your existing forms. Let's say you have like 50,000 or 1 million documents that you want to create PDFs from. Not a problem. You can take our migration tool and you can actually batch import all of those 2 million documents. And when you're importing it, it will automatically generate the PDF for you. Now, it will take several hours for 2 million documents, but you can do that. And the migration tool is also free. The trial is free. The migration tool is free. So you can essentially do this. I think it's free for up to 10,000 documents. And then you can just generate all of those PDFs without any cost whatsoever. And you could even send those PDFs to somebody or store them in a folder on the server. Now, you might need an hour from us to help you configure it, and we're here to help with that. So here's one scenario that we've done for a customer in the last few months. We've got several customers using this tool today, but it is coming out in DBXL version 3, which is available, but we haven't actually formally launched it yet. So in this scenario, what's happening is the office worker is creating a form. They're sending it out to those field workers in various locations. Those field workers may not be connected, so they actually have a tablet, in this case a Microsoft Windows tablet, because they're running the InfoPath client. They open up the XML from email, they double click it, it opens up an InfoPath form. They fill it out with their customers in the field, and they submit it in email to a SharePoint site. So you can configure SharePoint to accept incoming emails. SharePoint turns around and synchronizes that form. So step number 2, they're not actually submitting it to the web service. They're just sending email, which is key, right? Because for those forms that are installed locally, you cannot connect to a web service if you want to make them restricted, which means they can be filled out without any special connectivity whatsoever. So they fill it out locally, they submit it via email to a SharePoint site using an email address configured on that SharePoint site. This could be SharePoint Foundation. The SharePoint site then turns around, synchronizes it with our web service here running locally, which generates those PDFs back to the customer, right? It also maps it into your database so that you can do a report from your Great Plains or whatever. So the benefit here, obviously, is we're sending the PDFs back to those field workers or to the field workers' customers, and we're also mapping the data to a database. So this is a very powerful solution. DBXL comes with a number of benefits. Like I just said, it maps the XML data to SQL tables, queries those tables, allows you to query them with filters very, very fast. The submits, as you saw from the browser, were very quick. It works, of course, in 365 on-prem. We have this event receiver, which I did not demo today. We might demo it next week, which synchronizes, so you don't even have to add the web service submit to your form. You can just install the event receiver on 365 or on SharePoint, and it will automatically synchronize. You can even configure the event receiver to delete the documents once it's been submitted to the SQL database, so that you don't end up with a huge pile of thousands of documents on your SharePoint site. And the benefit of this solution, I think the most important thing is, unlike SharePoint, it scales to millions and millions of forms, or billions for that matter. It's basically just constrained by the SQL database. And it's low cost. So like I said, it's free to do this. We have a trial. Of course, if you want support, if you want to actually use it for more than 3 months, then we do extract a small fee, but it's well worth it, and it does include excellent support that we provide. So that's pretty much my presentation. More than happy to demo anything or talk about anything if you have questions. I also wanted to ask you, we have a package we'll send out with these samples, including the DBXL basic trial. I'll just send out an MSI that you can install. There'll be a link to download it because it's like 10 megabytes. And we'll also send you this SharePoint tool. I had a webinar about a month ago. I had epic fail on it. Basically was not able to get the demo to work. Well, anyway, I was going to demo it again today, but decided for the sake of time not to. But we have this tool that allows you to map your InfoPath forms not just to PDF, but also to SharePoint lists. We'll include that again today, along with the slide deck, if you just fill out those 4 questions. Actually, I think it's 4 questions, not 5. So it's very simple. Appreciate your time. But first, any questions from the audience? Do we still have everyone? It looks like we still have quite a few people here today. Thank you for joining. I'm more than happy to talk about anything that you might have questions on, including InfoPath, PDF generation. Let's see, no questions whatsoever. There's got to be some questions here. Okay, so Tom's got a question. Tom's question is, let's see, how do I, hold on just 1 second here, see if I can get this. I'm going to show all these questions here. So first question from Tom. Hey, Tom, thanks for being here. It's good to talk to you the other day. I just came back from Japan, so hopefully my audio quality is a little bit better than it was on April 2nd, if you were in that webinar. And obviously the demo went a little better today. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, Japan was great. I miss the climax forest of humanity is what I call it. It is the place with the most culture. Tim Joran, thank you for posting your question. Any way to control the print output shrink to fit page? Well, that really is a print driver issue, and that is a challenge. We don't have that in V1, but we are anxious to add features in V2. And I think that the answer is no. We don't have any way to control A4 versus A3 page layout or anything like that. It really depends on the default print drivers that are installed on that server. But yeah, it should be possible to do in the future. Greg, you've got a question. Gut feel on the future of InfoPath. Yeah, this is a great question. With the MS Ignite tweets this week being relatively silent, last time we talked to Microsoft, February timeframe, a couple months ago actually, and it looked like they were retrenching to come up with a new plan because the forms on SharePoint lists was shelved. They shelved the forms on SharePoint list idea, which was presented at last year's SharePoint conference. They shelved that because of the mobile support, and they wanted something that was going to work with apps and devices. So it was a good decision they made, but they're back to square one as of January, February. And so right now the Access team was, I think, what you call the pallbearer. That the Access team was actually steering the development of this new tool. I think that has changed. I think they've actually carved off the InfoPath team a little bit, even though there's only like a few people left. And they're trying something. They're trying basically to keep it going. It is shipping in SharePoint 2016 form services, that is, not the rich client. But like I said earlier, there's currently a few bugs in the preview, so don't install the Office Client preview. In terms of the future, I think people are going to stick with what they've got for a few years, and they're going to wait for Microsoft to come up with a viable alternative. In the meantime, there are a number of other alternatives out there. We've talked about them in previous webinars. We even have a tool called Forms Viewer that we're desperately trying to get version 1.1 out. after DBXL. We shipped 1.0 last year. We had a few people look at it. It's working pretty well. We've done a lot of demos on it, and it is a viable alternative for the future. And then, of course, if you're using mobile devices, you definitely want to look at Formotus. They've got a great client. They've actually just announced a designer, so they're sort of pushing forward as well. So we're trying to carry the ball forward with leadership and stewardship in this area of forms and SharePoint. Formotus is, Nintex is, K2 is, but I think most people are going to wait and see what Microsoft does, and they will do something eventually. They're just trying to retrench here. Donald has a question. Update your InfoPath form. You have to reload the form to your admin tool, correct? Not necessarily. If the schema does not change, you do not need to do that. It will still generate the PDF correctly. But of course, it won't generate the PDF if you change the view. So yes, you do need to do that if you want to get the new view to show up in your PDF. But if the view doesn't change and you've just made some changes to the logic, not affecting the schema, then you don't need to do that. Shane has a question. Is it just the Office 2016 preview that is uninstalling InfoPath, or will a full release do that too? No, it's a bug, so they're fixing it. So it is a bug in the preview. So just wait until the preview is fixed, and then it will work. Let's see, a question from Susan. I think this is part of a solution we need to send PDFs from InfoPath on SharePoint to ImageNow. Know of anyone who successfully implemented this? Not to ImageNow, but we've got several customers using the PDF generation feature today in production. So yeah, feel free to contact me and we can help you. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. We try to do these webinars every week. They're pretty informal. Sometimes we have demo failures. But anyway, if you have any suggestions whatsoever, please add those to the quick 4-question survey. We do have a few new webinars coming up here. We've got nothing planned for next week, so please let us know what you want to see next week. That's 514. But here's a few ideas for the future, and we've got a ton of stuff out there on YouTube. So thank you again. And one last question, it looks like. Oh, just a comment from Greg. Yeah, great to have you here, Greg. And anyway, hope you all had a great day, and thanks again for joining.